Hey, welcome to OT Asset Management Weekly. Today we'll have some light fare as I'm just going to talk you through the user interface of OTbase. And that means also if you're an OTbase active user, this is probably not worth of your time. But if you are new to OTbase or just want to get an idea how you can OT asset inventory in OTbase, this is for you. Keep in mind that you can ask questions in the comment section of whatever platform you're using, such as YouTube or X or LinkedIn. And I will try to address those questions somewhere during this webcast. So without further ado, let's just jump right into the user interface. What you see here is OTbase inventory after you have logged on, and you are looking at the inventory page where by default all the individual devices are listed depending on the scope, depending on your settings in the access control. So different users will be able to see different parts of the inventory. But before we go into any details here, we start at the top. We start at the main menu, which you can see here, which says inventory. And let's look what else is in that main menu. So there is an events menu item, and we just go to the events page. And the events page tells us about various things that happened over the course of the last 7 days or the course of the last 24 hours or 30 days, depending on the settings here. And what we see here, for example, is any new devices, if any new devices have been discovered by OTbase, any configuration changes, health events such as hard disk failure or something like that. New CVEs, that's usually something that people are interested in. What is new in terms of cybersecurity? Any particular new CVEs that I should be concerned about? And you see those listed here. You also see this distribution. So I could see, yesterday, couple of four new CVEs dropped yesterday. Then we have new problems that ties to the problem management part in OTbase, where engineers would make other fellow engineers aware of things like incompatibilities, any specific problems with a certain product. Then we have any open change cases, any changed systems, configuration changes at systems that are under version control. So for systems, think of a system such as a DCS or a machine line, and then you can approve the configuration as it presently is, and OTbase would tell you about any violations of configuration integrity. You would see that here, device is not seen over the last 7 days. This number is particularly high in our demo instance, obviously, because, well, we're using sample data here, and this is not continuously updated. And then we also have new data flows, which also is 0 at this point in time. Just as a general rule, for any item, almost any item that you see, you can drill down by selecting the item and doing a double click, and then you will get additional details for this particular item, such as in this example, the CVE, in a pop-up browser window. And why do we do this? Well, very simple, because this will allow you to open up multiple, or to do this drill down multiple times, and you can check the information side by side. That's why we use these pop-up windows. And in this particular example, you're getting the vulnerability profile that gives us details about the vulnerability. Affects Firefox versions below 127. And down here, I can see all the affected devices and where they are. So, events page. Now we go to the inventory where we started out. And the inventory piece is pretty complex, as you would like it to be, because OTS and inventories are complex in real life. So let's start again top down. On this left bar here, you see the various subcategories of your OT asset inventory. By default, we are looking at individual devices, which are listed here. And but you could also look at software, where you get a listing, for example, of all the software products. Again, if you wanted to check, well, this particular tool here, let's just say the Rockwell Clear Keeper, where do I have it installed? You just do this double click, and then you get the details in a pop-up browser window. Then we have systems in the sidebar, and the systems page is, I would say, very, very important in OTbase, because usually it makes much more sense to look at your inventory top down from a systems perspective rather than at an atomic level, like you're looking at individual devices, which you saw earlier in the devices inventory. Here we are looking at systems, and that could mean something like machine lines or something like an individual DCS. And so here we are in our Flatrock side. We see we have these various subsystems here. And this makes a lot of sense, for example, because you can tell OTbase, okay, this system as such, as it is configured right now, I'm going to approve this configuration. And then when you do that, OTbase will automatically inform you about any deviations from that approved configuration. You will also automatically get consolidated documentation. So if I'm interested in that particular system, I want to see everything about that system in the system inventory, I'm just going to do this double click, and then I see the consolidated system documentation, including the release management, the system relations, like the material flow. I see all the networks associated with that system. Then I see the port list that I can expand. And this is all generated automatically. Then I have a listing of all the various endpoints for that system. So this is some more high-level documentation for that system. Then to the left, I have networks, which gets me to the networks inventory in OTbase. And this might be of particular interest for most of you, because if you look at the average OT security platform, let me tell you, my friends, they don't know about networks. And that's bad. That's very bad, because if you don't know which particular network a device is on, what else is on that network, how would you be able to do important things such as network segregation, or just check if your security posture is where you want it to be? But when you don't know about any networks, it doesn't work. So your right eye is blind. You cannot see on that eye. And that's bad. So in OTbase, first of all, OTbase automatically discovers your networks, not just the devices, the endpoints on those networks, but also the networks themselves. It also automatically discovers your layer 1 connectivity, the hardware connectivity. That means the topology. You get automatic topology diagrams from OTbase. So this is what's going on here in the networks inventory. Every single row represents one network. If I want to learn more about that network, you know it already, I just do that double click, and this gets me the details about this network. That could include the location, where it is. Oh, I see it's in that particular building. I see other characteristics. I get the topology as mentioned earlier. So this is generated automatically. So you see the switches, you see all the controllers in that networks with their IP addresses and so on. Oh, that was a little bit too quick. So let's go back there. And then I also get the IP address list, which I think is pretty cool because it also informs you about any spare IP addresses. You can make address reservations. So in other words, the OTbase comes with an IP address management capability. As always, you can drill down just by clicking on something. And this is very important, my friends. So if you don't know your network associations in OT, you are pretty much lost, if only for the reason that for the average enterprise, we are talking about hundreds of individual networks, private networks, might even be more than 1,000 networks. And if you don't know what they are, and if you don't know which devices are on those networks, in particular, you're pretty much lost. So a network inventory is a very, very important foundation of an OT asset management system. And one other thing that I would like to point out, you can see already, you can use color codes. Most users would use something like safety. A safety network is specifically exposed by its color code. In this example, it's in red. And then you might have other categories such as real-time I/O, which you also expose in a specific color code. And this makes your overall network architecture very transparent. Another thing I would like to point out is that don't worry about all those private networks with identical addresses, such as 192.168.0.0/24. OTbase takes care of that. No worries here. So we are able to separate all those individual networks, private networks with identical IP addresses, just like magic. Then we have the locations directory in OTbase, also pretty foundational, because it tells you about the physical geolocation of any devices or networks or systems. And this concept that we're using here is also structured. It's hierarchical, as you can see here. So I have my flat rock facility, and within that facility, I might have buildings, I might have rooms, I might have cabinets, whatever, right? So this is totally structured by yourself. You can use different sublocations, and those sublocations will then be used for exposing where exactly a particular switch or PLC, for example, might be located, which is important, for example, for your maintenance staff, because every now and then they need to actually physically go to the unit. And if you expose that specific location in this location directory, it goes a long way, particularly if you also use floor maps, as you have seen before. So let's just check this out once more. In OTbase, you can always store maps like this, and your various sublocations can also be highlighted using these hotspots here. Okay, and this is a process. If you already have your floor maps, uploading them in OTbase, exposing those sublocations with hotspots and with additional imagery, for example, goes like that. Takes 5 minutes and you're done. And certainly that will go a long way, particularly for those users who are not necessarily familiar with all those systems, and maybe even not with the location itself, right? So they can quickly get an idea where a particular device actually can be found. And this is different from the systems inventory. You may remember here you have a flat rock site, okay? And we have those subsystems. Sometimes it will overlap, but not always. So the important difference is locations. Here we're only talking about geolocations that you can pinpoint on a map. Whereas systems, that's a functional perspective. What does the thing do? How does it actually, which part in the production process does it actually control, for example? And this, as I said, usually can overlap, but it doesn't have to overlap for a simple reason. So if you just consider you have a machine line 4, But some of the switches, some of the infrastructure, OT infrastructure for line 4 isn't in line. You will not find it. When you go to that line, it's not there. It might be in a server room, maybe even in a different building. So this is why it's useful to separate those dimensions. So on one side, you have the functional perspective, that is systems. And on the other side, you have the purely geolocational perspective, that is in the locations here. Okay, and as you can also see, you can attach all kinds of additional metadata, such as you can assign a location group that is totally defined by yourself. In this example here, we have something like clean room, so that anybody who needs to actually go to that unit 1 here is aware of I won't get in just like that, so I might have to wear specific equipment, clothing, etc. Same thing here with the PPE that tells you, oh, you're going to need personal protective equipment. And then we have something like, oh, this is a server room. So a lot of metadata that you can slap onto those locations, just like with the systems and the networks, and it will always be then exposed in any given context. So when you look at a device in that clean room, for example, you will see, oh, it's in the clean room. Then next item here in the sidebar, there is an import page where you would be able, as an example, to upload existing data. So something, some Excel data sheet that you might already have for your OT assets, you can upload those files right here. And now the question is, why would you want to do that? Well, basically, there are 2 major use cases, I would say. The first use case would be, well, it's not really about the technical specifications of devices, such as make and model, serial number, firmware version, etc., because usually this is discovered automatically by OTbase. But think about other items such as the description of a device. What does it actually do? So this particular RTU with an IP address of 192 blah blah blah, what does it do? And you may already have this information in an Excel table that was created by a control engineer maybe a couple of months ago, but you have verified, oh, the IP addresses are still correct and or the host name, and here I have, let's just say, the description for 50 devices. Then you would import this Excel table, and OTbase would automatically assign those descriptions to the respective devices that are already in the database. The second use case would be, there are some scenarios where we cannot automatically discover all your OT devices, especially when you think about DCS systems, because the DCS vendors, they are too afraid to let third-party applications in their little environment, because something might break. But why? Is your DCS really so fragile, guys? Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense to elaborate on this argument, so I just leave it at that. I'm just saying, usually the DCS runners say, no, you won't get in here. And then, well, the workaround is you take your DCS engineering application, or some DCS vendors also have a specific asset inventory application. Unfortunately, it's it lacks a lot of detail, and it's not really user friendly, and certainly is limited to the specific DCS of that vendor. But those applications often can export data, usually to an Excel file, and then you can take that Excel file and import it here, so that you also get your DCS devices with their firmware versions, etc., in your global OT asset inventory that you maintain in OTbase. So next item in the sidebar, here we have an extended area where you can really go crazy with your metadata. And you will see some items here that might already be familiar, such as network groups. I have talked about that earlier. So here you define which network groups you would like to use, something like real-time IO, non-real-time IO. Something like safety, you assign your color codes. You do that here, and most likely you will already have some corporate standard that you would simply apply here. Then you have the system groups. Then you have the location groups that I've also mentioned earlier. You have something like PPE. You could use something like offshore for if you're in oil and gas, or just to make everybody aware right away, this is an offshore platform. So you won't be able to get there by car. Then you have a lot of other aspects here, relation groups. This is for your physical process modeling. The custom fields, where you can extend the data model of OTbase in various dimensions. So it's not just all about devices. You could also create additional data fields for hardware products, for software products, for systems, for users. This is what you would do here. So for example, the mean time between failures or the mean time to recover. Those are not standard fields in the OTbase data model, but who cares, right? You can just define your own fields and they're treated pretty much identically. Then you can manage all your various tags here. You would see right away how frequently those tags are used and in which dimension. So just to give you another idea how you can enrich your data set with user-defined data such as tags. Tags are a very powerful concept, and you can even use also color coding for the tags if you want to make it even more user-friendly. Finally, we have search in this sidebar here. We're still in the inventory section. And in search, you can execute some very complex searches. You see you have listed all those various dimensions here. You can filter for specific hardware or software products, for a specific location scope, device groups, physical process scope, the OT systems that we have looked at earlier, the networks, and you can combine everything. You can also use negation, such as does not have a specific security product installed. Here are your tags. Here are your custom fields that you can use in your search. And then we have a couple of properties, such as the network exposure. Is it local, private, public, or trusted? Remember, this is very, very important, because OTbase knows about networks. It knows about data flow. It will also be able to tell you, well, so this device does have data traffic to the public internet, and you could simply search for that here. All kinds of other parameters. When you're done, you just click on search and you get your results. So certainly now I get the full list here with 5,000 entries, because I didn't use any criteria that will result in the full list. But if you have narrowed it down, then your list will be smaller, and you can save those searches like so. Anything that you have saved can then be pulled up again rather quickly with this drop-down menu. And you can even expand the screen real estate by clicking on that arrow. So there you have your search results. Anything that you save will also automatically be turned into a report. Those reports can be found at a different place in the main menu. They can be found here. Okay, so anything that you have saved as a saved search will automatically show up here, and that has the benefit that you can also slap it on the dashboard like so, and you will also get a timeline. You will also get additional charts, and then you will get this timeline here and see how things evolve over time. This is a typical example here, because it's about obsolete products. And if you don't do anything, this number will always increase, because over time, other products become obsolete. And then you get the device list and all the other good stuff, where those devices are, etc. So this is the report section, but we still we are still not done here with the main menu. So just as a warning, this will not be, we won't be finished in 30 minutes. I will go into overtime. So if you have other things scheduled, don't worry, you will be able to check out the recording on YouTube, on X, and on LinkedIn. So you can always go back to the recording if you have to leave in a couple of minutes because we are going to overtime. So in this reports page, since we are here, you also have a sidebar that tells you, well, you know, there are other reports available. So this is all about devices. Then we have another reports area for software products. So if you would like to see, for example, tell me about anything. Let's just use this first example right here. WinCC installations in Flatrock. So somebody already did that search, saved it. And just like so, like with a double click, I get this report and I would see where I have devices with WinCC installed. Then we have policies. So this is a more complex one. I'm going to tell you about policies in a couple of minutes. But once that you have defined configuration policies, they will also result in automatic reports, and you will be able to access those reports here. Just as a note here, why do we go to such great length with the reporting? There is a very simple reason for that. Every now and then you will want to share those results, those reports with others in the company. Might be co-workers, might be management. And here is the neat thing about the reports. As you see, those are individual web pages. So just like all the other drill downs that we have done, they open a new browser window. That browser window does have a specific URL that you can share because it's exposed here in the upper right corner of that report. And when I click on that icon, it's going to copy that URL to the clipboard. So I could send that URL to management, for example. Let's just assume they would be interested in your Adobe Flash Player policy and how many devices are compliant or non-compliant. You would send them the URL, and then when they click on the URL, they would get that same page here, if it is allowed by their access rights. So don't assume that you can send the URL to anybody, probably even to outsiders, to strangers, to the Russian hackers. They won't be able to use it because you need to authenticate before the page is opened. The benefit certainly is that when you use this URL, you will always get accurate live data. So that report will always be up to date, different from a PDF document or from an Excel file that you would send to management or whoever is interested in it, right? So that's one of the reasons why we chose that particular implementation with the pop-up browser window, etc., because you can share this page by copying the URL. And if you do so, any attempt to open the page will always be subject to access control. And the access control is super granular and tight. I can tell you that. So don't be afraid that the Russian hackers could see that page. No, they won't. So, and then we have CVE reports, also a very, very big area. Certainly, before we could talk about that, I will have to tell you about the workflows, which I'm going to do right now. So we have covered the events, we have covered the inventory, we have covered the reports, but what about the workspace? The workspace is certainly super important because here it gets to workflow automation. And maybe the the biggest piece of the workspace is the CVE workspace. It's all about vulnerabilities and vulnerability management. So once that you go to this, click on here, click on workspace, first thing you're going to see is the CVE area. Let's just assume you have the access rights because I mentioned that just a minute ago. And here you would see all the CVEs that affect your installed base. Usually that list is pre-filtered. Usually you would look at only CVEs with known exploits. You can see that here because the KEB box is checked. And usually you would see only CVEs with critical or high priority. This is something that you can change as you see fit. Then you have the individual vulnerabilities, which is obviously something different. So it's like a software product and installations of a software product. You have the CVE like a product, and then you have all the various installations, meaning all the devices that are affected by a particular CVE. And this acts like your vulnerability management master table, if you will, because you can see all the individual vulnerabilities, which is in this example roughly 30,000, and only because that KEV box is checked. So you will only see vulnerabilities with known exploits. If I uncheck this box, the number will get much higher. And in other words, this is a fairly long table, almost 1 million vulnerabilities. Guys, sorry. I have to break it to you. You are facing hundreds of thousands of vulnerabilities. That's the reality. And the reason why you were not aware of this fact already is because your other OT security or IT security products didn't show you that full reality. In most cases, simply due to the fact that they don't tell you about any Windows configurations, Windows with all its various applications. They account for the vast majority of vulnerabilities. That's a fact. I mean, I could even give you proof, because in OTbase you can filter that in a rather easy way. So you would see, for example, we have it. I don't need to go into that detail. I'm just saying you can see that clearly. And so the vast majority is associated with Windows products that you have running on your OT engineering stations, HMI stations, SCADA servers, etc. And this is something that you definitely must know about. And in order to know about that, you need the full software configuration of those Windows boxes. And if you're only focusing on automation devices, that space is reduced by a lot, but it's probably not a good idea to ignore the Windows vulnerabilities, if only because from a threat and risk perspective, what is attacked by ransomware? Well, let me tell you what, it's not your controllers, it's not your PLCs, it's not your actuators, your thousands of variable frequency drives. Those are not the target of ransomware, my friends. So it's all about Windows software. Therefore, you must be able to have those inventoried correctly and comprehensively. So, and then you're going to see all those vulnerabilities. And by the way, here we have a bunch for drives. Guess what? And they come with a base core of 9.8. Yeah, so that is probably something that you want to address. And again, this is like the master table. And the way you use this table is that you shrink it down to those pieces that you want to mitigate. Right? You want to turn this into remediation tasks. This is what you see here. Okay, here you can define your remediation tasks that address a specific part of that huge table. And how do you get there? Well, by prioritization. So you start with your criteria. So for example, let's first focus on anything with a that is remotely exploitable. And then let's focus on those vulnerabilities that only require a low attack complexity. And then you would work from there. You would shrink that table down. So just by using those two settings, as you can see here, I have shaved off about 600,000 vulnerabilities. And then it gets down and down and down. And when it comes to remediation, for example, when you think about those drives, you would certainly also limit a scope to a specific site. Because when it comes to automation gear, those will need to be remediated locally by local staff, local control engineers. So therefore, you would shrink it down to make it in a packet that is digestible, that can be processed by somebody whom you assign in the remediation task. So when you open a new remediation task, you can assign it to specific users, right? Or, this guy is working in that facility. And the logic here, or the link between that vulnerability master table and the remediation task, is similar to what you have already seen with the reports. It's based on those saved views. Okay, so such as high priority PLC vulnerabilities, that is something that I've saved in that vulnerability master table. And now I just assign it to this remediation task and say, okay, now Bernd, go ahead, fix that shit. Okay, and then get it done till the end of the week. That's me. That's me. Because if Bernd will not be able to actually do it, if only for a simple reason. When you're talking about remediating PLC vulnerabilities, you will need downtime. And so you will have to wait until the next scheduled downtime. And you can even express that here, downtime required, yes, hell yeah, you will not be able to update the firmware of your PLCs in a live production environment. So that gives you an idea what you can do here. We have a couple of additional tables and charts that really, really give you all the angles that you need to define effective remediation tasks. So a lot of stuff is going on here in the vulnerability workspace. Then we have change management in that next item here in the sidebar. Then we have problem management. I've briefly touched on that earlier. Then we have audits, which is all about configuration policies and compliance. So you can define configuration policies here. And let me give you an idea how that works. Okay, when I click on add, then I can name the policy. I can set the scope. So I can say, well, this should affect all devices. Probably not a good idea, but it's just there for historical reasons. You can assign a policy to specific devices, but most of the time, what you would do is you can slap the policy on a saved search. And that could be all Windows boxes or all systems running Windows 7, as an example. And the benefit of this logic is that this is what you could call a smart search, a smart list. So you have defined your search criteria on the search page, and anytime new systems are brought in your OT environment that haven't been there when you initially did the search, well, they were covered anyway. So let's just assume in this example, a couple of weeks from now, somebody adds a Windows box to your OT environment, and it's running Windows 7. So automatically, it's also going to be covered by this policy because the search criteria will apply to that new system. So very powerful approach here. And then you can, for example, specify any required software that could be an antivirus product, a whitelisting product, whatever. You can define any prohibited software. And you can also use those lists, like, well, it can be any of those, but some, at least one of these must be on those systems that are covered by the policy. So that is also very powerful. And let me probably give you the big picture here. Without configuration policies, without being able to establish compliance, your OT security efforts will lack you're not living up to your full potential, my friends, if you're not using policies and compliance, because you will always need to look at devices individually. And the idea with policies is that you have something like a bigger net that you throw over a bunch of devices that share a specific criterion, a specific property, something like, well, they have Windows 7 installed, or all the critical devices. And certainly you can combine these criteria and define policies for, let's just say, Windows 7 boxes that are critical, and also they are in my target security level 3 area, right? So you can combine all of that and then define specific configuration policies for those resulting devices. And now I think you get the idea. This is very, very powerful, because you're using criteria that cover not just one device. You don't have to look at devices individually, but you're looking at categories of devices. And then you make sure in a proactive manner that the configuration of these devices meets your requirements, how secure you think they should be or must be when let's just say they're critical for safety or something like that. Okay, so very, very powerful concept that unfortunately at this time very few people are using, because they are totally absorbed and obsessed by their risk and threat thinking. So this is something that I suggest you should get out of your mind. Most people in OT security are focusing way too much on threats and risk. They're focusing way too little on protection, especially when you think about a proactive approach, where I say, well, let's just use those security measures, let's just use those system hardening procedures, whatever you want to call it, because this will make our systems more secure. This will raise our protective level. And certainly this goes very well in hand with a lot of core concepts from IEC 62443, where you have those concepts with the zones and with the target security levels, etc., etc. So this will get you to a more proactive OT security approach, where you can then also document and demonstrate progress. Hell yeah, this is what has been lacking in OT security. So just as an example, you will see right away, and with this policy, must not run TeamViewer. You could add other remote access solutions that you don't want to see in OT environments. And you will see right away, this blue bar here, that's pretty big, right? 98%, the tooltip tells me right away, 98% are already compliant. That's good, right? And there's only a couple of devices left. What could those be? Well, you just do your double click, and then you will see those non-compliant devices right away. Look at those Europeans. I see right in Portugal and in Spain, they are still non-compliant. So this gives you an idea how that works. You see that right away. You get your metrics, you get your data for establishing process or the lack or progress or the lack thereof. And just and to reiterate it once more, anybody who brings in 10 new devices with TeamViewer on, bang, so the result will change right away. That orange bar, that portion is going to get bigger because you have new devices that are subject to that same policy as it is defined. So very powerful functionality in OTbase, and also in general terms, a very powerful concept in OT security. What else do we have? The users. Well, OTbase does maintain a local user database, but most of the time you don't use that. Most of the time you will authenticate directly via your Active Directory or via Entra, so using OpenID Connect. And When it comes to access control, this all happens right here in the groups piece. And here in groups, you can set up your access control items. Once that you have selected a group that will usually correspond to an existing group in your Active Directory or an existing group in Entra. And here you set the permissions. So you could limit the access rights of that group to just a particular small part of your inventory. In this example, we have said, no, they don't have access to the global inventory. They can only see a specific part of the inventory, which is everything in that body in white building that we have put here in the location column. And you could further break it down, like only something that's associated with the press, but nothing else. And they only have read permission, and then you can also fine-tune the access rights to a couple of other things, like do they have access to the change management, can they import data, and so forth. Next part and also last part here, last item in the main menu, administration, where you have the opportunity to do a bunch of settings. So like let's just look at the backup piece here. The backup, I think, is very interesting for OTbase inventory. First of all, OTbase inventory does backup your data automatically every 12 hours. And you see the list of backup files, at least the last, I don't know, 10 entries or so, right here. And if you had to restore a previous version because you just messed up your database by some faulty import or something, then you would say, okay, I select this one and then click on restore, just like that. Then you can do a lot of other interesting things. You can download such a backup file to your local computer, and you can upload backup files from your local computer. And this is extremely useful for test scenarios. So OTbase customers usually have a test server up and running, test and development, where they can check out their, I don't know, for example, their scripting, their script-based import-export. You don't want to do that with your production system, so you set up a test system. And you don't want your test system to just have an empty database, right? So you need some data to validate your scripting or whatever you're doing. And this is super easy because you just download the latest backup file that was produced. If it's let's just say it's 10 hours old already, or you just click on backup now, and then you have the current thing. And then you upload that backup file to your test server, and then bang, just like that, you have the latest data on your test system, and you can do your experiments with that data set. Let's go to settings. You can just you can modify a lot of things here if you don't like the defaults. Here is where you would check and manage all those automatic CVE downloads. So you see right away all those CVEs that are in the database at this point, almost 250,000. And then you can do all kinds of additional adjustments. This is the device categories and device types. This is about hardware device types. And here is where you can change the color codes, for example. So if you say, no, I don't like this light blue for the computers, it just sucks. In our company, we use, I don't know, red, or we use green. Oh, just be my guest. Just set whatever you want. And you can also do that for individual types. So in OTbase, we have a structured concept. We have a higher level, that's the device categories, because sometimes you just want to search or to select all computers. You don't care if it's a desktop or a server or a VM, right? So then you could use that category, but you can also do it a little bit more fine-tuned. You can say, oh, anything that's virtualized. No, that deserves a specific color. I don't want to use the category color. So those should be, I don't know, like turquoise. Okay, just like that. So and then there are lots of other things that you can fine tune, such as the email notifications. Which email reports do you want to get automatically? Where should they be sent and stuff like that. So with that, we're pretty much done on a surface level. Because there are so many other details left. Just look at all those buttons here, look at all the tabs. But this is not the subject of today's webcast. I just wanted to give you the high-level view of how, in principle, you navigate your way through OTbase with all the various parts. And in my opinion, I would say, and what most users are actually using, this is obviously the inventory piece, with its various sub-functions, subcategories. And then it's the workspace. You have the vulnerability management and problem management, etc. So this is used most heavily. And all the other stuff is available for specific additional objectives, such as the reporting. You usually want to have that for management. You want to have some proof of your success or maybe failure. This is something that you would find in the report section. Okay, so that's basically what I wanted to cover today. And well, we went to almost an hour. Do we have any questions before we shut down? I don't see any so far. Just speak your mind. Is there anything that you're interested in particular that you want to see? Here is now is your time. Just shoot it at me, and I will show you how things are, where things can be found in OTbase. So apparently that's not the case, as most of the time you're just overwhelmed. That's understandable. So therefore, we end on this note. Keep in mind, you can always reach out to us later on. So just shoot an email to info@langner.com or to sales@langner.com, or reach out to us via social media. See you next week, same place, same time.